Samantha Quinn felt the stinging of 1,000 hornets inside her legs as she ran down the long, forlorn driveway toward the farmhouse. The sound of her sneakers slapping bare earth bongoed along with the rapid thumps of her heart. Sweat had turned her ponytail into a thick rope that whipped at her shoulders. The twigs of delicate bones inside her ankles felt ready to snap. She ran harder, choking down the dry air, sprinting into the pain. Up ahead, Charlotte stood in their mother's shadow. They all stood in their mother's shadow. Gamma Quinn was a towering figure. Quick blue eyes, short dark hair, skin as pale as an envelope, and with a sharp tongue just as prone to inflicting tiny, painful cuts in inconvenient places. Even from a distance, Samantha could see the thin line of Gamma's disapproving lips as she studied the stopwatch in her hand. The ticking seconds echoed inside Samantha's head. She pushed herself to run faster. The tendons cording through her legs sent out a high-pitched wail. The hornets moved into her lungs. The plastic baton felt slippery in her hand. 20 yards, 15, 10. Charlotte locked into position, turning her body away from Samantha, looking straight ahead, then started to run. She blindly stretched her right arm back behind her, waiting for the snap of the baton into the palm of her hand so that she could run the next relay. This was the blind pass. The handoff took trust and coordination, and just like every single time for the last hour, neither one of them was up to the challenge. Charlotte hesitated, glancing back. Samantha lurched forward. The plastic baton skidded up Charlotte's wrist, following the red track of broken skin, the same as it had 20 times before. Charlotte screamed. Samantha stumbled. The baton dropped. Gamma let out a loud curse. "That's it for me." Gamma tucked the stopwatch into the bib pocket of her overalls. She stomped toward the house, the soles of her bare feet red from the barren yard. Charlotte rubbed her wrist. "Asshole." "Idiot." Samantha tried to force air into her shaking lungs. "You're not supposed to look back. You're not supposed to rip open my arm. It's called a blind pass, not a freak-out pass." The kitchen door slammed shut. They both looked up at the 100-year-old farmhouse, which was a sprawling, higgledy-piggledy monument to the days before licensed architects and building permits. The setting sun did nothing to soften the awkward angles. Not much more than an obligatory slap of white paint had been applied over the years. Tired lace curtains hung in the streaked windows. The front door was bleached a driftwoody gray from over a century of North Georgia sunrises. There was a sag in the roofline, a physical manifestation of the weight that the house had to carry now that the Quinns had moved in. 2 years and a lifetime of discord separated Samantha from her 13-year-old little sister, but she knew in this moment at least that they were thinking the same thing. "I want to go home." Home was a red brick ranch closer to town. Home was their childhood bedrooms that they had decorated with posters and stickers, and in Charlotte's case, green magic marker. Home had a tidy square of grass for a front yard, not a barren chicken-scratched patch of dirt with a driveway that was 75 yards long so that you could see who was coming. None of them had seen who was coming at the red brick house. Only 8 days had passed since their lives had been destroyed, but it felt like forever ago. That night, Gamma, Samantha, and Charlotte had walked up to the school for a track meet. Their father was at work because Rusty was always at work. Later, a neighbor recalled an unfamiliar black car driving slowly up the street, but no one had seen the Molotov cocktail fly through the bay window of the red brick house. No one had seen the smoke billowing out of the eaves or the flames licking at the roof. By the time an alarm was raised, the red brick house was a smoldering black pit. Clothes, posters, diaries, stuffed animals, homework, books, 2 goldfish, lost baby teeth, birthday money, purloined lipsticks, secreted cigarettes, wedding photos, baby photos, a boy's leather jacket, a love letter from that same boy, mixtapes, CDs, and a computer, and a television, and home. "Charlie!" Gamma stood on the stoop outside the kitchen doorway. Her hands were on her hips. "Come set the table." Charlotte turned to Samantha and said, "Last word," before she jogged toward the house. "Dipshit," Samantha muttered. "You didn't get the last word on something just by saying the words last word." She moved more slowly toward the house on rubbery legs, because she wasn't the moron who couldn't reach back and wait for a baton to be slapped into her hand. She did not understand why Charlotte could not learn the simple handoff. Samantha left her shoes and socks beside Charlotte's on the kitchen stoop. The air inside the house was dank and still. Unloved was the first adjective that popped into Samantha's head when she walked through the door. The previous occupant, a 96-year-old bachelor, had died in the downstairs bedroom last year. A friend of their father was letting them live in the farmhouse until things were worked out with the insurance company. If things could be worked out. Apparently there was a disagreement as to whether or not their father's actions had invited arson. A verdict had already been rendered in the court of public opinion, which is likely why the owner of the motel they'd been staying at for the last week had asked them to find other accommodations. Samantha slammed the kitchen door, because that was the only way to make sure it closed. A pot of water sat idle on the olive-green stove. A box of spaghetti lay unopened on the brown laminate counter. The kitchen felt stuffy and humid, the most unloved space in the house. Not one item in the room lived in harmony with the others. The old-timey refrigerator farted every time you opened the door. A bucket under the sink shivered of its own accord. There was an embarrassment of mismatched chairs around the trembly chipboard table. The bowed plaster walls were spotted white, where old photos had once hung. Charlotte stuck out her tongue as she tossed paper plates onto the table. Samantha picked up one of the plastic forks and flipped it into her sister's face. Charlotte gasped, but not from indignation. "Holy crap, that was amazing!" The fork had gracefully somersaulted through the air and wedged itself between the crease of her lips. She grabbed the fork and offered it to Samantha. "I'll wash the dishes if you can do that twice in a row." Samantha countered. "You toss it into my mouth once and I'll wash dishes for a week." Charlotte squinted one eye and took aim. Samantha was trying not to dwell on how stupid it was to invite her little sister to throw a fork in her face when Gamma walked in, carrying a large cardboard box. "Charlie, don't throw utensils at your sister. Sam, help me look for that frying pan I bought the other day." Gamma dropped the box onto the table. The outside was marked, "Everything, $1 EA." There were dozens of partially unpacked boxes scattered through the house. They created a labyrinth through the rooms and hallways, all filled with thrift store donations that Gamma had bought for pennies on the dollar. "Think of the money we're saving," Gamma had proclaimed, holding up a faded purple church lady t-shirt that read, "Well, isn't that special?" At least, that's what Samantha thought the shirt said. She was too busy hiding in the corner with Charlotte, mortified that their mother expected them to wear other people's clothes, other people's socks, even other people's underwear, until thank God their father had put his foot down. "For Christ's sakes," Rusty had yelled at Gamma, "why not just sew us all up in sackcloth and be done with it?" To which Gamma had seethed, "Now you want me to learn how to sew?" Her parents argued about new things now because there were no longer any old things to argue about. Rusty's pipe collection, his hats, his dusty law books splayed all over the house, Gamma's journals and research papers with red lines and circles and notations, her keds kicked off by the front door, Charlotte's kites, Samantha's hair clips, Rusty's mother's frying pan was gone. The green crock pot Gamma and Rusty had gotten for a wedding present was gone. The burnt-smelling toaster oven was gone. The owl kitchen clock with the eyes that went back and forth. The hooks where they left their jackets. The wall that the hooks were mounted to. Gamma's station wagon, which stood like a dinosaur fossil in the blackened cavern that had once been the garage. The farmhouse contained 5 rickety chairs that had not been sold in the bachelor farmer's estate sale, an old kitchen table that was too cheap to be called an antique, and a large chifforobe wedged into a small closet that their mother said they'd have to pay Tom Robinson a nickel to bust up. Nothing hung in the chifforobe. Nothing was folded into the keeping room drawers or placed on high shelves in the pantry. They had moved into the farmhouse 2 days ago, but hardly any boxes had been unpacked. The hallway off the kitchen was a maze of mislabeled containers and stained brown paper bags that could not be emptied until the cabinets were cleaned. And the cabinets would not be cleaned until Gamma forced them to do it. The mattresses upstairs rested on bare floors. Overturned crates held cracked lamps to read by, and the books that they read were not treasured possessions, but on loan from the Pikeville Public Library. Every night, Samantha and Charlotte hand-washed their running shorts and sports bras and ankle socks and Lady Rebels track and field t-shirts because these were among their few precious possessions that had escaped the flames. "Sam, Gamma pointed to the air conditioner in the window. "Turn that thing on so we can get some air moving in here." Samantha studied the large metal box before finding the on button. Motors churned. Cold air with a tinge of wet fried chicken hissed through the vent. Samantha stared out the window at the side yard. A rusted tractor was near the dilapidated barn. Some unknown farming implement was half buried in the ground beside it. Her father's Chevette was caked in dirt, but at least it wasn't melted to the garage floor, like her mother's station wagon. She asked Gamma, "What time are we supposed to pick up Daddy from work?" "He'll get a ride from somebody at the courthouse." Gamma glanced at Charlotte, who was happily whistling to herself as she tried to fold a paper plate into an airplane. "He has that case." That case. The words bounced around inside Samantha's head. Her father always had a case, and there were always people who hated him for it. There was not one low-life alleged criminal in Pikeville, Georgia, that Rusty Quinn would not represent. Drug dealers, rapists, murderers, burglars, carjackers, pedophiles, kidnappers, bank robbers, their case files read like pulp novels that always ended the same bad way. Folks in town called Rusty the attorney for the damned, which was also what people had called Clarence Darrow, though to Samantha's knowledge no one had ever firebombed Clarence Darrow's house for freeing a murderer from death row. That was what the fire had been about. Ezekiel Whitaker, a black man wrongly convicted of murdering a white woman, had walked out of prison the same day that a burning bottle of kerosene had been thrown through the Quinn's bay window. In case the message wasn't clear enough, the arsonist had also spray-painted the words "nigger lover" on the mouth of the driveway. And now Rusty was defending a man who'd been accused of kidnapping and raping a 19-year-old girl. White man, white girl, but still tempers were running high, because he was a white man from a trashy family and she was a white girl from a good one. Rusty and Gamma never openly discussed the case, but the details of the crime were so lurid that whispers around town had seeped in under the front door, mingled through the air vents, buzzed into their ears at night when they were trying to sleep. Penetration with a foreign object, unlawful confinement, crimes against nature. There were photographs in Rusty's files that even nosy Charlotte knew better than to seek out, because some of the photos were of the girl hanging in the barn outside her family's house, because what the man had done to her was too horrible to live with, so she had taken her own life. Samantha went to school with the dead girl's brother. He was 2 years older than Samantha, but like everyone else, he knew who her father was, and walking down the locker-lined hallway was like walking through the red brick house while the flames stripped away her skin. The fire hadn't only taken her bedroom and her clothes and her purloined lipsticks. Samantha had lost the boy to whom the leather jacket had belonged, the friends who used to invite her to parties and movies and sleepovers. Even her beloved track coach, who trained Samantha since 6th grade, had started making excuses about not having enough time to work with her anymore. Gamma had told the principal that she was keeping the girls out of school and track practice so that they could help unpack, but Samantha knew that it was because Charlotte had come home crying every day since the fire. Well, shit. Gamma closed the cardboard box, giving up on the frying pan. I hope you girls don't mind being vegetarian tonight. Neither of them minded because it didn't really matter. Gamma was an aggressively terrible cook. She resented recipes. She was openly hostile toward spices. Like a feral cat, she instinctively bristled against any domestication. Harriet Quinn wasn't called Gamma out of a precocious child's inability to pronounce the word mama, but because she held 2 doctorates, one in physics and one in something equally brainy that Samantha could never remember, but, if she had to guess, had to do with gamma rays. Her mother had worked for NASA, then moved to Chicago to work at Fermilab before returning to Pikeville to take care of her dying parents. If there was a romantic story about how Gamma had given up her promising scientific career to marry a small-town lawyer, Samantha had never heard it. "Mom?" Charlotte plopped down at the table, head in her hands. "My stomach hurts." Gamma asked, "Don't you have homework?" "Chemistry." Charlotte looked up. "Can you help me?" "It's not rocket science." Gamma dumped the spaghetti noodles into the pot of cold water on the stove. She twisted the knob to turn on the gas. Charlotte crossed her arms low on her waist. "Do you mean it's not rocket science, so I should be able to figure it out on my own? Or do you mean it's not rocket science, and that is the only science that you know how to perform, and so therefore you cannot help me?" There were too many conjunctions in that sentence. Gamma used a match to light the gas. A sudden whoosh singed the air. "Go wash your hands." I believe I had a valid question. Now. Charlotte groaned dramatically as she stood from the table and loped down the long hallway. Samantha heard a door open, then close, then another open, then close. Fudge! Charlotte bellowed. There were 5 doors off the long hallway, none of them laid out in any way that made sense. One door led to the creepy basement, one led to the chifforobe, one of the middle doors inexplicably led to the tiny downstairs bedroom where the bachelor had died, another led to the pantry, the remaining door led to the bathroom, and even after 2 days, none of them could quite retain the location in their long-term memory. Found it, Charlotte called as if they had all been breathlessly waiting. Gamma said, grammar aside, she's going to be a fine lawyer one day. I hope. If that girl doesn't get paid to argue, she's not going to get paid at all. Samantha smiled at the thought of her sloppy, disorganized sister, wearing a blazer and carrying a briefcase. What am I going to be? Anything you want, my girl, just don't do it here. This theme was coming up more often lately. Gamma's desire for Samantha to move out, to get away, to do anything but whatever it was that women did here. Gamma had never fit in with the Pikeville mothers, even before Rusty's work had turned them into pariahs. Neighbors, teachers, people in the street, all had an opinion about Gamma Quinn, and it was seldom a positive one. She was too smart for her own good. She was a difficult woman. She didn't know when to keep her mouth shut. She refused to fit in. When Samantha was little, Gamma had taken up running. As with everything else, she had been athletic before it was popular, running marathons on the weekends, doing her Jane Fonda tapes in front of the television. It wasn't just her athletic prowess that people found off-putting. You could not beat her at chess, or Trivial Pursuit, or even Monopoly. She knew all the questions on Jeopardy. She knew when to use who or whom. She could not abide misinformation. She disdained organized religion. In social situations, she had the strange habit of spouting obscure facts. Did you know that pandas have enlarged wrist bones? Did you know that scallops have rows of eyes along their mantles? Did you know that the granite inside New York's Grand Central Terminal gives off more radiation than what's deemed acceptable at a nuclear power plant? If Gamma was happy, if she enjoyed her life, if she was pleased with her children, if she loved her husband, were stray, unmatched pieces of information in the 1,000-piece puzzle that was their mother. What's taking your sister so long? Samantha leaned back in the chair and looked down the hall. All 5 doors were still closed. Maybe she flushed herself down the toilet. There's a plunger in one of those boxes. The phone rang, a distinct jangling of a bell inside the old-fashioned rotary telephone on the wall. They'd had a cordless phone in the red brick house and an answering machine to screen all the calls that came in. The first time Samantha had ever heard the word fuck was on the answering machine. She was with her friend Gail from across the street. The phone was ringing as they walked through the front door, but Samantha had been too late to answer, so the machine had done the honors. Rusty Quinn, I will fuck you up, son. Do you hear me? I will fucking kill you and rape your wife and skin your daughters like I'm dressing a fucking deer, you fucking bleeding heart piece of shit. The phone rang a 4th time, then a 5th. Sam. Gamma's tone was stern. Don't let Charlie answer that. Samantha stood from the table, leaving unsaid the, what about me? She picked up the receiver and pressed it to her ear. Automatically, her chin tucked in, her jaw set, waiting for a punch. Hello? Hey there, Sammy Sam. Let me speak to your mama. Daddy! Samantha sighed out his name, and then she saw Gamma give a tight shake of her head. She just went upstairs to take a bath. Samantha realized too late that this was the same excuse she had given hours ago. Do you want me to have her call you? Rusty said, I feel our Gamma has been overly attentive to hygiene lately. You mean since the house burned down? The words slipped out before Samantha could catch them.